Most people misunderstand attraction. They think it's about big moments, loud signals, or obvious actions. But in reality, attraction is often built in the quiet details that most people don't even notice. It doesn't always show up in words. It shows up in behavior, in presence, and in the way someone naturally reacts when they feel a deeper connection. Think about it for a second. When someone is truly drawn to another person, they don't always know how to explain it. They don't prepare it. They don't plan it. It just shows up in small instinctive ways. A slight lean closer during a conversation. A natural comfort with personal space. A gentle gesture that feels more like awareness than intention. These things are subtle, but they say a lot without saying anything at all. And this is where most people get confused. They overthink the obvious and completely miss the subtle, because real attraction doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks calm. Sometimes it looks respectful. Sometimes it looks like nothing at first. Until you learn how to read it, what you're about to understand is not about guessing feelings or forcing meanings. It's about recognizing patterns in human behavior. It's about understanding how closeness is expressed in small physical cues that happen naturally when someone feels connected. So instead of chasing confusion or overanalyzing words, start observing actions. Because actions reveal what words often hide. And once you understand these quiet signals, you begin to see attraction in a completely new way, clearer, simpler, and more human than ever before. When we talk about attraction, one of the first and most natural places it shows up is the hand. It might sound simple, even too ordinary to matter, but that's exactly what makes it so important. Because the hand is where intention becomes visible without words. It's where distance starts to close in the most respectful and subtle way. When a man feels a genuine attraction, the hand often becomes his first point of connection, not in a dramatic or forced way, but in small natural actions. Like offering his hand while walking together, gently guiding you through a crowd, or simply keeping his hand close enough that connection feels possible if the moment allows it. These are not big gestures. They are quiet ones. But quiet gestures often carry the deepest meaning. The hand represents trust. It represents safety. And more than anything, it represents comfort in shared space. When someone reaches out their hand naturally, it's rarely just physical. It's emotional. It's a way of saying, without saying anything, I feel comfortable with you here. And comfort is always the first stage of real attraction. But what makes this even more interesting is how subtle it is. There is no pressure in it. No rush, no expectation. It's just presence expressed through movement. A man who is genuinely interested will not force connection through the hand. Instead, he will let it happen in a way that feels natural, respectful, and in sync with the moment. That is what separates intention from discomfort. You'll also notice that the hand often becomes more active in moments of emotion. During laughter, during conversation, during shared excitement, there may be small touches or brief moments of contact, not to control, not to dominate, but to stay connected in the experience. It's like an anchor that keeps two people emotionally in the same space. And here's something important to understand. In healthy attraction, the hand is never about possession. It is about guidance and presence. It reflects awareness of space, timing, and comfort. A respectful man understands that touch is not about taking. It's about offering. Offering comfort, offering ease, offering connection without pressure. So when you see this kind of behavior, don't rush to label it or overthink it. Just understand what it really is. It's one of the most basic human ways of saying, I'm here with you. And in the world of attraction, sometimes that simple presence means more than anything else. The shoulder is one of the most overlooked signals in human connection, yet it carries a quiet kind of meaning that words often fail to express. When a man feels genuine attraction or even a growing emotional comfort with someone, the shoulder often becomes one of the first areas where subtle connection appears, not in an invasive way, not in a rushed way, but in a soft, almost protective gesture that feels more like presence than action. Think about how the shoulder works in human interaction. It's not a romantic symbol by default. It's a grounding point. It's where reassurance naturally lands. So when a light touch happens here, it often carries a message of support rather than desire alone. It might happen when someone is walking beside you and gently guides you forward, or when he lightly taps your shoulder during a conversation to emphasize encouragement or agreement. These moments are small, but they are loaded with meaning when you start noticing them. In attraction, the shoulder becomes a kind of silent language. It says, I see you, or I'm here with you, without needing to turn those thoughts into words. And that's what makes it powerful, because real connection is not always loud. Sometimes it is calm, steady, and quietly reassuring. A man who feels emotionally aligned in a moment may naturally use this kind of touch as a way to bridge closeness without crossing boundaries. There is also a protective quality to it. When someone lightly touches the shoulder in crowded spaces or guiding situations, it often reflects awareness. Awareness of surroundings, awareness of your comfort, and awareness of movement. It's not about control, it's about making things smoother, easier, safer in the moment. That kind of behavior often shows emotional presence more than physical intent. What makes this even more interesting is how unplanned it usually is. The shoulder touch doesn't feel rehearsed, it doesn't feel forced. It happens in passing moments when attention is naturally focused on the other person. That is why it often feels so genuine. Because authenticity is not loud, it is subtle. It blends into the flow of interaction without breaking it. In the bigger picture of attraction, the shoulder represents emotional grounding. It reflects the desire to stay connected in a calm, respectful way. It's not about intensity. It's about stability. A man who uses this kind of gesture naturally is often communicating something deeper than attraction alone. He is showing emotional ease in your presence. He is showing comfort in shared space. And most importantly, he is showing a quiet form of care that doesn't need to be announced. So when you notice this kind of gesture, don't rush to interpret it as something extreme. Instead, understand its softness. Understand its intention. Because in human behavior, the smallest touches often carry the most honest meaning. The upper back is one of those areas where human behavior becomes very subtle, but also very revealing. It's not a place people touch randomly. It sits in that careful space between personal distance and guided connection. And when attraction is present, or when a man feels a strong sense of comfort with someone, this area often becomes part of how he naturally communicates support and direction. A light touch on the upper back usually appears in moments of movement. Walking through a crowd, entering a space, or guiding someone gently in a certain direction. But what matters is not just the action itself, it's the intention behind it. In most cases, this kind of touch is not about control, it's about awareness. It's about making sure the other person feels guided rather than rushed, supported rather than pushed. When attraction is present, this gesture becomes even more natural. Not because it is planned, but because comfort changes behavior. A man who feels emotionally aligned with someone may become more attentive to their surroundings, more careful with their space, and more conscious of small actions that keep interactions smooth. The upper back becomes a soft point of contact that helps guide without breaking the flow of connection. There is also something important about how gentle this touch usually is. It's not heavy, it's not forceful, it's brief, light, and often almost accidental in appearance. That lightness is what gives it meaning, because in real human connection, the most honest gestures are the ones that don't feel performed. They feel natural. They happen in the moment without overthinking, and they disappear just as quickly as they appear. In many cases, this gesture reflects attentiveness. A kind of unspoken, I've got you energy. It's not about dominance, it's about coordination, it's about making shared movement easier and more comfortable. When someone subtly places a hand near the upper back, it often signals that they are mentally tuned into the other person's pace, direction, and comfort level. And in the context of attraction, that awareness becomes even more meaningful. Because attraction is not only about closeness, it's about how someone handles closeness. A respectful, emotionally aware person doesn't invade space. They adapt to it, they move with it, and the upper back touch often becomes a reflection of that balance between interest and respect. What makes this gesture powerful is its simplicity. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't interrupt the moment. It blends into it. And that is why it often goes unnoticed on the surface level, but still leaves a strong emotional impression underneath. So when you see this kind of behavior, it's not something to overinterpret in a dramatic way. Instead, see it as a sign of ease and connection, a sign of natural flow between two people. Because in real human interaction, the strongest signals are rarely loud. They are quiet, thoughtful, and deeply respectful of space. The arm is one of the most expressive yet underrated places when it comes to human connection. It sits right in the middle of personal space and social space, which is exactly why it becomes such a natural point of contact when attraction or emotional comfort starts to grow. A touch on the arm is never just physical. It is often emotional, timing-based, and deeply connected to the moment two people are sharing. When a man feels drawn to someone, the arm becomes a way to stay connected during conversation. You'll notice it happens in very natural moments. While laughing at something, while reacting to a story, or while emphasizing a point in a discussion. It's brief, light, and often unplanned, but it carries a very clear message underneath. I'm with you in this moment. That is why the arm works like an emotional anchor. It brings two people into the same rhythm. In communication, especially when emotions are involved, words alone are not always enough. The arm touch adds a layer of presence. It makes the moment feel shared instead of separate. It quietly bridges the gap between speaking and feeling. In attraction, this becomes even more noticeable, not because it changes in intensity, but because it becomes more frequent in moments of emotional alignment. When someone feels comfortable, they naturally lean into small physical confirmations. A light touch on the arm during laughter, a brief hold during excitement, or a gentle tap when expressing agreement. These are not rehearsed actions. They are instinctive responses to emotional connection. What makes this gesture so powerful is how short it usually is. It doesn't last long enough to feel intrusive, but it lasts long enough to be felt. That balance is what gives it meaning. It respects space while still creating connection. It says, I acknowledge you without breaking the flow of interaction. There is also an important emotional layer to this. The arm touch often appears when someone is genuinely engaged in what you are saying. It reflects attention, it reflects interest, and more than anything, it reflects emotional presence. A man who is mentally and emotionally present in the moment will naturally express that through small, grounding gestures like this. And unlike more noticeable forms of interaction, the arm touch is subtle enough to feel natural in almost any setting. It doesn't demand attention from others. It stays within the private rhythm of two people sharing a moment. That is what makes it feel personal without being overwhelming. In the bigger picture of attraction, the arm represents shared emotional timing. It shows that two people are not just talking, but experiencing the moment together. It turns conversation into connection and presence into understanding. So when you notice this kind of behavior, don't rush to give it a heavy meaning. Instead, understand the softness behind it. Understand the intention behind it, because often the smallest touch on the arm is simply a human way of saying, I'm here and I'm with you in this. The back of the hand is one of the most delicate and subtle areas of human interaction, and that's exactly why it carries so much meaning when it appears in moments of connection. It's not a place people touch casually or without awareness. So when it does happen, it often reflects intention, care, and a very mindful kind of presence. In the context of attraction, this gesture is usually soft, brief, and extremely respectful in nature. It might happen during conversation, when emphasizing a point, or in a moment of reassurance. A light touch on the back of the hand can quietly communicate support without interrupting the flow of interaction. It doesn't demand attention, and it doesn't try to dominate the moment. Instead, it blends into it naturally, almost like a passing expression of understanding. What makes this gesture so interesting is its emotional tone. It is not loud and it is not intense. It is calm. It carries a sense of gentleness that feels intentional rather than accidental. In many cases, it shows a level of emotional awareness where a person is carefully considering comfort and space while still expressing connection. That balance is what gives it depth. When someone is genuinely attracted or emotionally engaged, they often become more mindful of small ways to stay connected without crossing boundaries. The back of the hand touch fits perfectly into that space. It's a way of saying, I understand you or I'm here with you without overwhelming the interaction. It respects distance while still acknowledging closeness. There is also something symbolic about this gesture. The back of the hand is often associated with gentleness and reassurance rather than possession or intensity. So when it appears in human interaction, it can reflect a softer emotional state. It is not about claiming space, but about sharing it in a respectful way. That difference is what makes it meaningful in subtle attraction dynamics. Another important aspect is timing. This kind of touch usually appears in emotionally charged but positive moments. A shared laugh, a meaningful statement, or a moment of agreement. It acts like a small pause in the interaction that reinforces connection, not in a dramatic way, but in a grounding one. It brings attention back to the present moment and creates a brief sense of closeness. What people often miss is that gestures like this are rarely about grand meaning in isolation. Instead, they are part of a larger pattern of behavior. They gain significance when combined with tone, presence, and consistency. A single touch means very little on its own, but when it aligns with comfort, respect, and attention, it becomes part of a bigger emotional language. So when you notice this kind of behavior, the key is not to overthink it or turn it into something bigger than it is. Instead, understand it as a soft expression of presence, a quiet way of saying, I see you and I'm here in this moment with you. Because in real human connection, the most genuine signals are often the ones that don't try to be noticed at all. Now, when you look at everything we talked about, one thing becomes very clear. Attraction is not a loud event. It's not something that suddenly appears in big gestures or dramatic moments. It's built slowly, in small actions, in subtle signals, and in the way two people naturally feel comfortable around each other. Most people miss these signs because they are busy looking for something obvious. But real human connection doesn't always announce itself. It shows up quietly, in a guiding hand, in a light touch on the shoulder, in a moment of shared laughter where presence speaks louder than words. And once you start noticing these patterns, you begin to understand people on a completely different level. But here's something important to remember. These signals are never meant to be analyzed in isolation. Human behavior is complex. One gesture alone doesn't define intention. What truly matters is the overall energy, the consistency, and the comfort between two people. When respect and ease are there, everything else flows naturally. So instead of overthinking every small detail, learn to observe the bigger picture. Learn to understand how someone makes you feel, how they show up in your space, and how naturally the interaction flows. Because that is where real connection lives. If this made you see attraction in a new way, then take this understanding into your daily life. Pay attention, stay aware, but always stay grounded. Because the best connections are never forced. They grow naturally when both people feel safe, seen, and respected. And if you want more insights like this, stay connected. Because understanding human behavior is not about guessing, it's about learning how people truly express what words often fail to say.